In this video, we're going to be looking at the 5 basic checkmate patterns you need to know with the major pieces. If you get down to only rooks or queens and your opponent only has a king, you have to be able to win those games. So let's get right into it. Alright, let's start off with probably the easiest one. We have 2 queens. We managed to promote a second pawn into a second queen, and we need to checkmate our opponent. So we are going to be using a technique known as the step ladder technique. Some people call it the rook roller or just the ladder. I like the term step ladder because you're going to be stepping on the king every single move to move it to the opposite side of the board and deliver a checkmate on one of the files. So right now, our queens are in the perfect position to start doing this mate. So they're holding hands. No matter how close the king gets, it will never be able to take either one of our queens because the queens are protecting each other. So right now, this queen is cutting off this file, and our idea is we want to walk this king over to the other side of the board to deliver a checkmate where one queen will cut off this file and the other queen will cut off this file. So how can we do that? Well, we step on the king like this, right? We're giving a check, and the king cannot go this way because this queen is covering this file, right? So the king has to go this way. Now we're going to keep this queen cutting off this file because now if we give a check with the same queen, the king will just go back, right? So we don't want that. So we're going to use this queen now, which isn't doing anything, to give another check, right? So now the king can't go backwards, can't stay on this file because it's in check, so we're going to go this way. Let's say the king gets a little bit closer. We give another check, the king will walk up here, and we don't get worried because the king is getting close, right? We just continue doing the exact same technique. We can be right next to the king, it doesn't matter. The king has to go down, give another check, and now we deliver the final checkmate. There's a few here, but if we want to continue doing the stepladder technique because it's just the simplest, we can give this check right here. And we see that this queen is cutting off this file, and this one is cutting off this file. The king has nowhere to run, and it's in check, so this is a checkmate. It's really important when using this technique that you are actually stepping on the king with check every single time. If you're just mindlessly moving your queens, every other row, but you're not actually giving a check, it's pretty easy for the opponent to run their king into a place where it's going to be stalemate. And if you're up 2 queens, you want to win. You don't want to draw, and stalemate is a draw. So in this situation, our queens aren't exactly set up for the technique right away, but they could be. So let's use this queen and give a check. And now whichever way the king goes, we will close the gap between these 2 queens and we will follow it. So let's say they go here. All right, so let's move this queen up here, right? So we don't want the king to go back up this way. It might not be the fastest way, but it's definitely the simplest. And this type of technique is something you can pre-move in fast games, right? So, okay, we've got our 2 rows cut off, and now we're step laddering the king down instead of to the side this time, right? But notice every single time I'm giving the check, it doesn't matter how close you get, you can just keep walking down and give a checkmate like this. All right, let's take a look at our next basic checkmate pattern, and this one is with a queen and a rook. We can use the exact same step ladder technique with just one little detail we need to pay attention to, and that is that it actually does matter which piece is closer to the enemy king. And we need to have the rook to be the closest thing to the enemy king because the queen can hold on to the rook. It can protect the rook because that's just how the queen moves. But if these 2 pieces were, switched around, like say this, and we start trying to use our technique, once the king gets close, if we continue to move up, well, then the king can just take our queen. And now we have to do the rook technique. By the end of this video, you'll know how to checkmate with just a rook, but it's a lot easier if you've got a queen on the board, right? So we need to make sure that our rook is in front so that the queen can hold on to that rook no matter how close the king gets, and we can just continue our step ladder without thinking any further about it. Okay, so in this case, we are cutting off this row and this row. Okay, so let's move our rook up. It might be a little bit of a longer mate, but let's see how this goes. So notice no matter how close it gets, we're just going to keep walking the king down, and this is pretty simple, right? It's just checkmate on the other side of the board. Okay, now let's take a look at how to checkmate with 2 rooks. We can keep using our stepladder technique, but now we've got another thing we need to pay attention to, and that is the enemy king. So in this case, when the rooks are like this, they're not protecting each other, and that's how they're going to stay as they're, walking the king up the board. So if the enemy king gets close, we may need to shift one of these rooks to the other side of the board to get it out of the way and move it to safety. Okay, so let's give this check, moves up, give this check, moves up, and now we want to give this check, but if we do so, the king can just take, right? And we don't want that. We want to keep giving our nice step-ladder mate. So instead, we're going to move this rook to the other side of the board, far out of the king's reach, right? And let's say this king goes and attacks this other rook. Well, same thing. We're going to go over here. We don't want to go on top of this rook because then they can't move, right? We want to keep them on the diagonals to each other. So now if the king tries to run back, right, we will give this check, again, cutting off these rows so that the king can't move backwards, and we will deliver the checkmate on the back rank. Okay, now we're down to just one single queen. Now, in the last 3 examples, I made sure to emphasize that you want to step on the king with check every single move to do the step ladder technique. In this case, that's not what we want to do. If you're just going to continue to check the king, you're either going to run into the 50 move rule or you're going to repeat moves and it's going to be a draw. You're up a whole queen. You don't want to draw, you want to win, right? So in this case, we want to put our queen a knight's move away. We don't want to check. We want to, as if our queen was a knight, we want to be checking the king that way. But notice it's not a check, it's just simply a knight's move away. So the king will have to move, right? Because it has nothing better to do. And we will follow exactly what the king does. So if the king goes down and to the left, we will go down and to the left, right? If the king goes straight across, we will go straight across. And we will continue this process until the king runs its way into a corner. And as soon as this happens, as soon as the king steps into a corner, hands up, you need to stop. You cannot continue doing the knight's move away thing, because if you do, it's going to be a stalemate, right? So this queen is cutting off all the files, or all the squares where the king can go, and it's the king's turn to move, so that's a stalemate. And again, we're up a queen. We want to win. We don't want to draw. So once the king steps into the corner, we're going to cut it off. Let's say right here, we can also, go somewhere along this file. But this is the easiest, right? So we're trapping the king, so it only has these 2 squares to go back and forth between. And now, as the king starts to do that, we're going to bring our own king over, slowly, step by step, right? And just do not move this queen, just leave it where it's at. Keep moving our own king until it's close enough to assist with a checkmate, assisted by the king, like so, right? So the king cannot take because it's protected by our king, and that's our checkmate right there. Our final major piece checkmate we're going to be talking about today is with a single rook. So in this case, again, it's a completely different technique than any of the other ones we've talked about, but it's pretty simple once you sort of get the hang of it, so do pay attention. So in this case, these pieces are actually set up perfectly to start giving the mate. So these 2 kings are in what's called opposition, which means they're facing off and neither king can move forward. There's like a force field right along this row that they cannot cross. Neither of them can cross. And so this king cannot go this way at all. So we will give the check with our rook, kind of similar to the stepladder technique, to force it back, and now it has to go backwards. And now we don't necessarily want to step into the opposition ourselves. We can maybe go here or here. We don't necessarily want to go here. Let's say here. And if the king, again, steps into the opposition, we will give the check, right? And now let's say the king gets kind of close to our rook, a little bit dangerous. Similar to the 2 rooks thing, we just move our rooks to the other side of the board. We don't want to move it over here. We want to continue cutting off this file, so we can move it here. Now let's say the king goes here. Again, we don't necessarily want to step into the opposition. We can maybe go here. Let's say it goes up. And I do promise that eventually it will be forced to step into the opposition. You just kind of have to chase it around a little bit and maybe make a waiting move with our rook, right? So now we give the check again, cutting off this and this, right? Goes back. Let's go here, not necessarily here, because then we'll have to make more waiting moves. Let's go here, and let's say the king runs all the way down and chases our rook. Do we want to move the king? No, because then we'll lose our rook, right? So we move all the way back to the other side of the board. We can maybe go here, 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 and we don't want to go here again because we're stepping into that opposition and it's going to be a bit of a longer mate. So instead, if that seems to be our only move, we can make a waiting move with our rook and sort of force the king to make a decision, either step into the opposition again or go back. And now this king has no choice if it wants to stay on this file. It has to step into the opposition. Now we give the check again, forcing the king back, and we can go here, 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 and all the way up. Again, if the king attacks our rook, we just go to the other side, calmly continue to follow the king, not making any extra moves here. And again, not necessarily want to step into the opposition here. We can make another waiting move with our rook just to waste time. And then eventually the king will have to step into the opposition. Now the king is cut off here, right, because of our king, and we can deliver this mate, kind of like a back rank checkmate, but it's on the side of the board. If you're still a little bit slow with some of these checkmates, I would highly encourage you to toss these pieces on a board and practice them over and over and over again, just to drill the techniques and make sure that you have the confidence to convert the win when you're up a whole bunch of material. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing and let me know what other kind of chess content you want to see. See you soon!